Okay, so we are live, and welcome to William Vincent Carleton's live stream. Tonight we are going to be talking about the delicate art of forgiveness, what this means, what the purpose of forgiveness is as far as humanity is concerned, and where things are now in terms of technology and development, and where we're landing in this world of technology and the confusion that comes with it. Good evening. Nice to see you. If you're watching, welcome. The delicate art of forgiveness is something that seems to be really present in my life right now. So while it's so prominent, I wanted to bring it to the forefront and talk about it. And I have some pages written tonight. So let's just dive in. The essence of forgiveness involves understanding what are primary needs. And primary needs are the things that humans seek naturally for means of survival. So we're talking about the unconscious mind and what it is driven by. These are the primary needs. So we're looking at them right here on the left. Food, shelter, sleep, procreation, sex, protection. And I put a question mark next to money, technology, and communication. What's the reason for that? Well, I would argue that money gives you access to all of the above. Technology, in a way, aside from, in terms of giving you access to money, it definitely plays a role nowadays. And communication is one of these strange things because communication has changed since the dawn of text messaging, which was really coined by Ryan Seacrest with American Idol. He, would say, okay, everyone cast your vote via text to this number, and it became a phenomenon after that. So basically, when we're talking about the art of forgiveness, the essence of forgiveness, we need to understand first what are the primary needs of humans. Because when we start to talk about a couple being together or a family that's trying to work in a nuclear way, or even you could consider working with others in a workplace, we need to understand that primary needs are always going to have a position in negotiation, especially the longer that time goes. The more the time goes forward without accomplishing one or many of these, it's going to create discord. Okay, so we've covered those. Let's start to scroll a bit. The next thing I want us to talk about are conditional assurances. So what are conditional assurances? These are the things that when we are in the honeymoon phase of a relationship and we're coming forward and giving it our best, we are offering conditional assurances to the other in order to convince this person that we are of value and that we should be with that person. So these conditional assurances that convince the other person as a means of negotiating, this is like the cherries on top. Sometimes they're absolutely essential, though. Let's go through them here. Level of education. And you see here above I had put asset. That is because education is one of the very few things in life that the more that you acquire, the stronger the asset becomes. So education, as far as going to college, getting a degree, studying on your own, watching videos such as this, reading, writing, these things have to do with contributing to your education. And the more you do contributions to your education, the stronger the asset becomes. It's the only thing that I can really imagine that no one can take from you is your education. And it's not like a car. When you're driving your car after buying it brand new out of the parking lot, it immediately depreciates. Education appreciates. It is an asset no matter how you look at it. Okay? So as we go back here, we look at the level of education as an asset. Good looks, I wrote here temporary. It's a liability. When you see the person for the first time and you're showing them your attractiveness and your good looks, guess what, folks? I mean, in some cases, looks can get better over time, but rarely. And it has a shelf life where eventually it's going to start to turn and it's going to peak and hit its maturity. And at that point in time, it's going to become a liability. So if you're basing your assurances and your agreement to be in a relationship based on good looks, it's only going to last a certain amount of time. That's why it's conditional. Okay, let's look at physical ability. Physical ability I have here as a liability because, once again, it's like that car coming out of the parking lot. The moment that you buy that car and you buy into the idea of a relationship, the physical ability of that individual is at its peak. Unless you're working with the other to kind of soup that car up, and very few couples really get to that point. Those that do it, I applaud, because it's a very hard thing to do, especially after you get married. If you decide to take that plunge, a lot of physical ability goes down the drain for the sake of sheer exhaustion when you have children, or if you're having to pay a mortgage, a home, and you're working extra hours. It takes a toll on the physical body. So let's go back to this. Another conditional assurance, and the reason why we're talking about these conditional assurances, in case you're wondering, how the heck does this have to do with forgiveness? And it's because at some point in time, the conditional assurances are not going to meet or match what the initial idea was. Because the initial idea that's bound in romanticism, especially in Western world, has to do with this idea of everything being static and perfect for the rest of time, which is a total crock. There's no possible way that could ever happen. But we, base the system on it. And for that reason, we have difficulty apologizing and accepting apologies from one another. And we fall deeper into the rabbit hole and difficulties with these things the more that we get involved in social media and the technology extension of ourselves, because these things allow us to have an escape to say, listen, we are static. We are an avatar. We're in fact never going to change. And our conditional assurances are actually unconditionally static. They will not change. And it's the furthest thing from the truth. If you're trying to function in real life, in this base reality, it's not going to match. So that's why it's important to have these talks tonight about the art of forgiveness. Because some point will come where you're going to have to negotiate. And I hope that you do, instead of being indifferent and blocking the individual and not communicating, because that does psychological damage to everyone involved. And when children are involved, they get hurt too. Okay. Breadwinner, like I said, provider. I put here temporary question mark. It could be that someone has won the lottery or understands how to earn money for the rest of their life. Even if they were to go through bankruptcy, the other person would not have to worry because of the ability for this person to earn. And in that case, I would say absolutely the individual has a conditional assurance that it is an asset. However, if the person comes in with, like in my particular case, when I first was married, I brought a lot of savings in, and I left the United States and went to Mexico, and everything went down the drain. And not only that, the conditional reassurances or conditional assurances that I was giving to my now ex-wife is that I was able to come in with my career established, language, culture, family, all of my roots in place. And all that stuff got flipped on itself. So the conditional assurances actually did not match the bill that I was given in the beginning. And so, how much can you accomplish through negotiation at that point in time? It's kind of like a recipe for a disaster, unless you have a very strong basis in communication and you have a friendship. If you have a basis in communication and a friendship, then you're going to make it work. We talked about this in Loving Relationships yesterday, that the three foundations or the three building blocks are communication, physical connection, and then the soul of the relationship, which has to do with the 9 universal energies, which we covered yesterday. Culture, intelligence. Intelligence is an asset. It goes right alongside education, the level of education. If intelligence is increasing, I would say it's an asset. It can be a liability if you start to specialize too much. But if your intelligence is built in a way that is the way of the polymath, which is absorbing information from all different resources that you can get your hands on and enjoying that process, then someone's buzzing me here. Oh boy. Ugh. It's nice to get messages while streaming. So what I'm going to do is stop that. Okay. In any case, jumping back here, when we're looking at intelligence, it is an asset unless you are specializing too much on it. If you're specializing too much on the intelligence factor, then you can kind of be like, whoa, that's over my head kind of thing, and that can become a liability in a relationship too. Culture. I was not really sure how to respond with this. I would say it could be an asset or a liability depending on the specific culture that you're immersed in. For example, right now, being in Mexico, American culture has its pros and cons. And the same thing, if my children were going to come stateside, their exposure to Mexican culture would be sometimes a challenge and sometimes a difficulty. It all depends. It's situational and it's environmental. Commonalities. I would say a liability and an asset. And why do I say that? Well, because it changes. Your commonalities change over time. Let's say we both start off, I meet someone and she's a social worker and I'm going to social work school and we become social workers. And then I decide that I have a spiritual epiphany and I'm now, studying yoga and going to retreats and doing all that. And she wants nothing to do with it. Our once commonalities become a liability because we based a foundation on these commonalities in the beginning and now they're no longer. So because they're no longer, there has to be a negotiation to try to find a middle ground. Foundation of communication. This is an absolute asset. And I would say that this is the thing when we're going to talk about the pact between a couple. And that pact should be one that is never interrupted, never messed with, that it becomes sacrosanct. When you say, this is our basis for communication. This is how we get through situations that are challenging and resistance-based. This is how we save money. This is how we spend money. This is how we keep freedom in our lives and be able to be together. And this is done over the course of time. You're disseminating all of the bases for your bases for foundation in harmony. And it should never be interfered with. If you're letting family members come in and interfere, it's a big no-no. It's going to cause major discord. So we'll get back to the idea of commonalities and understanding that you should have this pact with your couple. And I'm saying all of this because it comes back to the idea of forgiveness. When we feel disappointed, we're going to have to reapproach these things because indifference is the worst possible route to take. Okay. Let's keep going. Sexual intimacy. That's an absolute asset. It's where you get all the stuff out that you can't otherwise get out in a daily basis. I mean this. No matter how kinky you are or no matter how wacky you need to be, you should have the trust built with the person that you love. We're talking in relationships here. To be able to have that sexual intimacy so that you can just kind of release and surrender the things that are otherwise really weighing on you. And if you have this as a piece of your tool belt, as a part of your tool belt, it's very helpful. And you'll see here I also mention intimacy in 4 ways. Emotional intimacy. This is the idea of being able to cry in front of the person that you love, or to break down and to not feel like you're going to be scrutinized or made to feel worse. Spiritual intimacy, for someone to say, yes, I had this spiritual experience in my life. It was profound. It was based in a dream, but it's revealed itself over time. And now I believe in X, Y, and Z. And being able to share that with someone and how it's important to you, that is spiritual intimacy. It's the ability to share the oneness that you found in yourself through practice. It's important for some people. Whoops. Intellectual intimacy. This is one that's overlooked quite a bit. It's the idea that you're interested in absorbing information on the daily, and you want to share this with someone that you love. And by sharing this with someone that you love, the intellectual intimacy becomes a very important asset to a relationship. And if that doesn't exist, it actually, if it only is one-sided, it can be a liability for sure. What ends up happening is people often seek intellectual intimacy with other people thinking it's not cheating, but it definitely is. And I'll explain more in a little bit. You know, anytime you're saying that I get this from another person and there's no way that my partner could ever do this with me, and you're not having that conversation with your partner, you haven't had it yet, you're intellectually cheating. Sorry. Paternal, maternal intimacy. This is the idea of caring for the person that you love when they're in need. You take on a paternal role. And this is through sickness and through health. Love thy neighbor even. I mean, really, if you see someone that can't get through a certain situation physically, or if they're sick and they need help, it's your responsibility as a loving, kind individual to be able to provide support. And that is done through the paternal and maternal instinct. This is a very, very important part of the forgiveness process. If this is lost in the fray, if someone doesn't recognize that everyone has, especially their partner, has a little inner child within, then major issues will arise from that because it exists. The last one we have here is receptivity. Mindful listening, capacity to love, balanced giving and receiving. I don't think there could be one more important aside from perhaps intelligence and the idea of, having intellectual and sexual intimacy. Receptivity is so important. This is the idea of someone mindfully being present. And for those who are therapists that may be tuning in, you will understand that 99% of therapy is just listening. Listening and more listening. And that is the idea of being receptive towards the other person. Mindful listening is, I'm listening to this person without any urgency or need or desire to speak or interrupt. And through that, there is a great capacity to love. And it is a muscle that must be worked regularly, or else it shall atrophy. Receptivity is the opposite, like the internal muscular structure of being lovingly present. And if that atrophies, it will often lead to people saying, I've had enough of this. I can't do it anymore. I give up. Indifference. Can't do it. Sorry, ghosted, blocked, all that. I'm just not going to listen anymore. And so I suggest make a daily practice of being receptive and listen to people. For example, I was on the subway today and this gentleman came in, an older gentleman walked into the subway, into the car, and I had taken a seat with a few stops to go, and I saw the gentleman was older, in his 80s. I stood up. I said, Señor. He went and sat down, and he started talking to me. And I thought to myself, all right, I'm going to listen to this guy. So I saw myself kind of looking down at him sitting, and I just said, what am I doing? I got down in a crouch, and I looked at him on the same eye level, and he just spoke to me for 4 stops until my stop came. I was nodding and listening to him. And I shook his hand and I said, thank you for sharing, and this is my stop. And he seemed like he was completely recharged. He seemed happy. And whether or not he was happy wasn't the point of it. It was the fact that I was receptive and I built the muscle. Think of it like the game theory. You're gaining experience in the process of being a mindful listener. So if someone then contacts you and says, I need help, I actually got the contact tonight. A woman who hadn't sent me a message in a long time. She said, I don't know who else to reach out to. I don't know who else to speak to. Please help me. And I said, This is one suggestion. This is another one. But really what she needed, I think, was just someone to say, I'm here for you and I'll listen. And if you say you're here for someone, it makes an incredible difference in their day and in their life. This comes from Thich Nhat Hanh, How to Love, which is a beautiful book that can be read in one sitting. It's the idea of saying, I am here for you. And when you do, it cuts the anxiety and the stress that the person has into a smaller portion that's manageable. It's a hugely powerful term to use. It's an affirmation. So practice it. Okay. Going into conflict of interest. Conflict of interest occurs when there is an asset that is a conditional assurance that has become a liability. And this happens over time. It's natural. If it affects primary needs, negotiate. How do you negotiate? You say, things aren't the way that they used to be. Let's figure this out. It's really like that. Let's figure this out. Let's come up with a plan. Let's at least try it. If we fail, guess what? We failed together. Great. We'll become stronger now. We'll know how to do it better, I swear. So let's come up with another way. And you can usually inject humor into it when you start to fail together, thinking you have the perfect plan when you've been let down. You look at each other, you say, well, it was a good try, but it's pretty freaking funny. So fall back on the things that work well. Usually it's sex. The body's designed for it. So, put it to use. Let's check and see if we got anyone chatting on chat. We got no one chatting on chat, so we're going to keep going here. If negotiation doesn't occur through communication, resentment is born. And if resentment festers without resolution or communication, there's increased suffering. One must then speak clearly, or it will lead to indifference. And remember, I say this all the time, indifference is the opposite of love. Let's not jump ahead. Here are the results of indifference. Suffering on both sides, gossip, rumor spreading, defamation of character, denying access to conditional assurances because they become a liability. So once they become a liability, suddenly I'm not going to give this person sex. I'm not going to give this person my intelligence. I'm not going to give them the reassurance and feedback for their childlike self because they should be a man. He's not providing, he's not working the way he used to. So I'm not going to give these things either. Eye for an eye, the whole world goes blind. And we have these issues that start to come about. Diminishing of communication starts to lead to just not responding. That could also spin off into betrayal or cheating. And like I said, it's usually intellectual cheating to start. Oh, my boyfriend or girlfriend doesn't understand. I try to explain it to him over and over again, and he just doesn't get it. But you do. You do because you really listen to me. Meanwhile, the person that loves this individual that's not hearing this conversation wants to be present and listening, but they're not given the opportunity because another asset has fallen to the wayside. The conditional assurances in other areas have started to reach entropy. And so as that starts to happen, the entire foundation starts to crumble. You can see here that the results of indifference have multiple effects. Entropy of the couple, destruction of the family dynamic. You must think about how this can affect children. It doesn't matter if you're not arguing in front of them. I can tell you what, if you're not displaying love in front of your children and it's not true and it's not part of your pact, then they're going to feel it. They're going to feel it without a doubt. Go ask any child psychologist. They're going to tell you the same thing. Resentment leading to verbal, physical, environmental aggression. This is when you got to make the decision to say, okay, we need, number one, if someone's in danger, you call the police. 2, we need to now go for counseling. We need to figure out for sure if this is worth salvaging. And then, of course, if this continues for a long period of time, it leads to long-term psychological damage. This is when we no longer choose to listen to the other person and be mindful and be present and to negotiate because the disappointment is too great. The thought in the mind, this story that had once existed in the beginning, is this very powerful image, this very powerful movie reel that's just constantly on play in the background of the mind of an individual. And that is just static. It's just static. It's an image, but it's nothing in comparison to what things are now. It's a totally different world. It's a different season entirely. Think about how characters change over the course of seasons in whatever series you've loved. Think about Jon Snow, in Game of Thrones, how he changed his trajectory over time, losing all power, gaining all power, and these constant struggles between himself, his heart, what he should be doing, what his calling is. These things are going to happen to human beings. They're going to happen to us. They may not be in Westeros, but they're going to be in our world, and our world is constantly moving. And this is all to say that we live through seasons in life. And it is just so important to recognize that this static reel, this idea is romanticism, and it's knocking on the door to say, if the individuals don't meet this the way it was in the beginning, then you should just give up. Because technology allows us to give up. But it's just tearing the fabric apart of individuals, especially the children that are coming into the ghost generation. So the reason why I'm bringing these things up is to show you the results of loving kindness. You have increased trust, increased honesty. And I would say right with that comes humor. When you have loving kindness, humor can inject itself into all the honest idiosyncrasies that you bring to the table. Go watch Good Will Hunting as Robin Williams. It's a sad scene, but he talks about the wonderful qualities of his wife who he lost to cancer. He talks about how she was just, these moments that were so true but so funny. And it was the stuff that he loved the most, because it was the stuff that they didn't mind sharing with one another, because they did not judge. This leads to an improved level of communication. It increases your health, your state of well-being. It improves intimacy, without a doubt. You can go in and say, listen, honey, I really like that thing that you did that one time, but I just didn't have the courage to say it again, but I'm saying it now because it felt so good. It's like one of those things, or I read this in Kama Sutra, or, I heard that this happened in this movie and let's give it a shot. Okay, shouldn't feel any embarrassment. You should be embraced for that. It improves your intimacy, because this comes from loving communication and just accepting the person for all they are and what they're evolving into. And if they're evolving into something that affects the primary needs, you bring it up in communication and you negotiate and you make adjustments. This is the idea of traveling the road with someone in your life. It's not easy, but the accelerated growth is beyond anything you can achieve on your own. That's the truth. And if you're in it to grow in this world, in this lifetime, because you don't take for granted the life that's been granted to you out of the 200 million sperm that raced to the finish line and you made it, and you actually find value in that you made it, and expanded from this cellular structure into the human that you are, which is essentially the expansion of what a human would expand to be the size of a planet. That's what happens inside a female body after you won the lottery and made it to the finish line and were granted life and ability. So it's important, I think, to take that into consideration when wanting to be with someone, knowing that you can grow faster with someone than by yourself. Higher rate of professional and personal achievements, growth, increased self-esteem, reinforcement of the pact that nothing permeates this plan of the couple. It is sacrosanct, and that it improves parenting as well. Children develop better. They get better grades. You find that they'll have less issues with falling into delinquency. Of course, incarceration rates drop. All of these things have an effect when you're being lovingly kind to another. Okay, let's go into Page 2 now. We're about 30 minutes in. No comments as of yet. That's fine. Looking at the temptations of technology and how to avoid 99.9% of modern day discord. How could it be? It's true. Here's the first one. You're going to love this one. Try it. Try it for a week. See how it makes your life so much easier. Use smartphone technology only to communicate logistics with your significant other, i.e., plans and directions. Otherwise, wait or make a phone call. Imagine the idea of actually making a physical phone call. Imagine that. I mean, they actually call it a phone for a reason, right? So that you make phone calls. So call the individual. Have an exchange. Start working on that communication. Because I'll tell you what, text messages will get you in big trouble if you're trying to explain your emotions. I say this for myself. I'm a writer. When I'm writing, I want the characters to come forward, and they usually bring a lot of drama to the table. So when I start to get involved in text messages, man, I stir up drama. I don't know what it is, if it's innate, if it's just a part of who I am. I stir it up. And I know, no, I don't even know better. I still do it. It's like what I said, it avoids 99% of discord, but it's a freaking hard thing to do. Here's another thing. If you're trying to communicate something that's non-logistical and important, and you're not with your significant other present with them, which will be ideal, answer the phone call when they call. Okay? Answer. Don't blow it off. Don't start talking shit about the person to the person that's next to you that you're intellectually cheating with. Have a conversation with your love. Answer the phone. Encourage one another to have direct interactions as frequently as possible. Why? Cell phones incite dopamine receptors in the brain, which activate the fight or flight part of the nervous system. This is the sympathetic nervous system. So what does this mean? And brain and behavior and psychology tell us. It means when your dopamine receptors are going, it means you can't learn. It's a light switch. It's either on or it's off. You can't have your cake and eat it too when it comes to dopamine and acetylcholine, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which, by the way, you get choline from leafy greens. So if you're not consuming leafy greens, you're likely going to have some problems with your behavior. I'm just going to tell you right there. Get your leafy greens on the daily, or else expect issues with your emotions. Dopamine, when it's saturating the brain, it happens when we get all these notifications. Like when I got that notification on my phone and I went running for it, dopamine exploding in my brain. And I have to go on autopilot in that moment for the next 30 seconds and hope that my autopilot is attuned enough to get me back on track. And in this case, it was. We're talking about intelligence between a couple. And that just comes with time, because when you're working on a typewriter, you're sliding the carriage and you're loading pages, and those notifications are coming up all the time. So you become conditioned to deal with interruptions. But if you're not conditioned to deal with interruptions, like on the cell phone, when those notifications pop up, dopamine's firing in the brain, and it's just fight or flight. You can't expect to learn unless the parasympathetic nervous system is up and running. And the way to get it up and running is to do some long, deep, mindful breathing. And for those who want to have access to that, I have it on my Patreon page. It's just a little plug. You go to Patreon/shiftofmind, and you'll find, just by giving $1.50 a week, you can get access to a brand new meditation every week. And the first one that's up there right now has to do with mindful breathing. So go get it. Go get it and start switching the light switch from dopamine saturation to acetylcholine as soon as you can. Okay. While dopamine receptors are saturated, the brain is unable to retain information, i.e., there is no learning taking place, and it places people often in an agitated state. Note, it is important to understand that, because messaging services that involve texting often remain as permanent, i.e. the messages remain permanent. They're subject to re-review by your significant other when they are calm, when you are calm, and you're going to be thinking, holy shit, I said that? Oh, God, she's going to read that. Oh, no. If I apologize, it's going to make it worse. Oh, my God. What am I going to do? That's why. Avoid 99.9% of the discord by just not even writing that stuff at all. Because it will never serve you. It won't. You might hit the bullseye once in a while. The rest of the time, it's just a mess. Because eventually, everyone's going to calm down and come back to it and say, you know what? That was really mean. And even though we shouldn't be defined for those statements because of what we said when we were upset and irrational, we are. We're being defined. We're being talked about to other people and being told, well, they're telling each other about how horrible the things that were said, you know. And so unless you're really under control with your communication, for someone like me, you know, I'm not very good at it because I'm just blasting stuff on pages all day. When I hop on the typewriter, I don't even know what's written at the end of the page, but it's exciting. You know, it's exciting. But just think about what kind of an impact that has if I decided to let the floodgates open and start typing text messages to someone that I really care about when I'm not totally relaxed. And so you can only imagine how many people I've upset through text messages, and that perhaps I'm doing this lesson on the art of forgiveness for myself. Okay. So like I said, the issue with this is that it leads to resentment in many cases and has an effect on the relationship that may be indelible. And most of us that have used smartphone technology can relate to this. It's the whole, quote, shoot first, ask questions later analogy, which is why cell phones should only be used for logistics and research purposes. Period. Okay. How to apologize when you make a mistake. Okay? This is how you do it. Let's start. Number 1, recognize the behavior as clearly as possible, the behavior that was unacceptable. Okay? Here's an example. Let's say that I fired out a page after typing a couple on the typewriter and I said something stupid. I've said many stupid things in my heyday and really every day, today even. Let me see, what was a dumb one that I said today to someone? I said, what did I say that was really dumb? I know the person that is, if the person's watching, probably could fire it off right away. Let's just give an example. And I say, you know what? When I woke up this morning, I thought to myself, why is it that you don't respond to my messages when I send them? You know? It's a common courtesy. Why don't you respond? And even though that may make sense, it's not fair to say because I'm not speaking in the first person. Okay? I'm blaming the individual for my own insecurities and needing a response for something that I sent. That's the truth. Okay? So in order to apologize, I would say in this case, listen, in my insecurity, I felt that I needed a response. And when I didn't get one, I got upset and I wasn't fair to you. I took it out on you and I projected, and that wasn't fair. That's the way to recognize the behavior. Okay? That's the way to recognize it. So it's been recognized. Next, I'm going to say, I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for taking it out on you because of my own insecurity. I'm suffering right now and I need help. This opens up the channel for the individual to say, I'm here for you. If they don't say I'm here for you, they should at least say, listen, I'm upset too and I need time. Give me 15 minutes. I'll get back to you. I love you. Or give me a half an hour, give me the afternoon. Try to make it no more than an afternoon because the person's going to be just thinking and repeating things in their mind, and it's torturous. For someone who's suffering in the moment, It's fight or flight the entire time. So really do some long, deep breathing and come back to the person when you say you're going to, and give it time. So listen, I can't listen to this right now. I need 15 minutes. I need to take my time. I'll come back to you. I love you. 15 minutes comes back, and here is the person to say, thank you for apologizing. But before that happens and that's said, the person who's apologizing is going to say, next time. So the next time strategy is this. I'm sorry for doing that. Next time, when I am feeling like I need a response and it's not coming, I am going to write another page, or I am going to go take a walk, or I'm going to do some long, deep breathing. And this is where the person who is receiving the apology should come forward and negotiate, because it isn't one-sided. It shouldn't be one-sided. It should be both parties win here. The individual has come forward and admitted that they were wrong and admitted that they were sorry and they wanted to do it better next time. So the individual that's receiving the apology in forgiveness offers a strategy to say, okay, and next time, if it's really important, say it in the email. Listen, honey, it's really important that I get some feedback from you. Please let me know when I can expect it back. And if the person can't respond right away, they can at least send a message if they've read the email and it's come in and the red receipt is there, whatever it is. Check the email, and if they don't check the email, let's say 8 hours goes by, you don't check the email, the person who sends it could say, listen, I sent this email. It's really important that I get some feedback from you, please, if you would. And that's fair. That shouldn't incite an argument. That shouldn't incite someone being indifferent, because these are basic needs that human beings are providing feedback with. And there shouldn't be any argument generated from that. Okay. Like I said, you keep all communication in the first person perspective. Mention that you plan on never repeating this again. It's a absolute, but you're going to try your best. I'm going to try my best not to do this again. And the measures in place are great, because now I know I can say, hey, this message is really important to me, that I get some feedback if you would. And the loving person that's receiving this, moving forward, says, okay, look, this person's following the steps. They said what they were going to do different this time, and now they're doing it. So I better recognize that, because this is part of the conditional reassurances that we give. The conditional assurances are that we're having a strong communication base. And maybe it's been lacking a little bit, so let's strengthen it. Let's lift it up together. And you work together. If the individual can't work together, it's do some long, deep breathing, because it's simply an indication that the mind is in fight or flight. And if the mind is in fight or flight, you can change that through long, deep breathing. 12 breaths or less per minute will change the circuitry to where receptivity becomes possible, and the individual can then give a response to say, this was a good moment. We worked hard at this. I can tell that you did too. Thanks for listening, and it's a good moment. And this is how you offer forgiveness. Listen fully to the explanation of the unacceptable behavior. This is important. Listen fully. Resist all temptations to interrupt. If the apology happens via text message, call your significant other. If the person apologizing doesn't pick up, explain this must happen over a direct phone call, or even better, in person. Set a concrete time to talk and listen mindfully, i.e., no urgency to speak, listening to this person like the person I listened to on the subway. Take responsibility for your feelings, speaking in first person as well. I felt upset when this happened, or when I had this expectation and it wasn't met, I felt disappointed. It's not, well, I sent you this message and then you didn't get back to me and I told you it was important. No, I sent the message. My expectation was that I would receive a response. It never came. And this made me feel really sad, or it made me feel disappointed. And it's okay to say that it made me feel sad and disappointed, because you know what? Your feelings are important. Your story is important. 1 million people in this world could have no problems with not receiving a message response. Okay? 1 million people in this world, 1 billion people could have no issues. But their story isn't more important than yours. Something could have happened in your life that led to you feeling this way. That feeling is important. When you bring it to the table in a relationship, this becomes part of your pile of wounded gifts that I talk about. John O'Donohue says it in Adam Cara. That this need for a response is a wounded gift. It has another flip side to it that has something so beautiful to offer to the individual that this person loves. And so embrace this wounded gift and say, you know what? He's got this thing. He really needs a response when he sends his creative output. And I offer it to him because, you know, he's there for me. He's there for me more than anybody else has ever been there for me in my life. And that's saying something, because I've been with a lot of great people. But he has this level of intelligence where he knows how to meet me when I need it most. And he'll drop anything in a dime if I tell him I'm in need and I need help. And he'll be there. So I do this for him because it affects him if I don't. And I love him. This is part of it. You know, you get it? Avoid the temptation to rub the other person's nose in their own poop. If you are receiving an apology, this is so important to say, you see, I knew you were being an asshole. And, you know, you did this to me before and you're just a jerk. This is taking someone who's come forward with their childlike self, offering an apology, and they are extremely fragile and vulnerable. Just consider it that way. They're suffering and they're wanting unity with you. And if you come back and you say, here's all your shit, smell it. Smell it again, smell it again, smell it again. You're not going to finish your sentence. I'm going to rub it in your nose for the rest of your fucking life. This happens to people. Pardon the F word, but it's for emphasis. You know, this type of thing does so much damage. So please, if you are on the receiving end of an apology, avoid the temptation. And then also, like I said, offer a strategy as well to help avoid the situation moving forward. What is the agreed upon strategy? And after all that's said and done, I guarantee you're going to feel good. Agree that it was a good moment and offer love against all of your ego-driven desires to be mean and resenting, and just offer love and let it go. Let it go. It's heavy. It's a heavy talk, right? It's a practice. This is a practice. You got to understand. It's not something that comes naturally to people. It's a yogic practice. The idea of forgiveness. And let's end, which I feel really satisfied having shared this, because it's nice to review as we go through and remind my own self of the importance of forgiveness and vulnerability. There's great strength in it. Here's a prayer for forgiveness that I'm going to end this stream with. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who's watched. And please do subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you. A prayer for forgiveness. May the days when we are told we are less than divine pass right through us. May the moments when we falter be replaced with a warm reception. May the time spent ruminating be replaced with loving certainty. May all conditions of suffering be soothed with a loving gaze. May all tears be witnessed as courageous materializations from our hearts. May all wrongdoings be seen as passing trials, now overcome by love. May I receive your mercy after moments of indifference. May my inner child receive your loving embrace and ancient comforts. May our wounds heal by our loving gaze and gentlest touch. May we find a way to love with a curious mind and an open heart. May the past remind us of how we may live this day better from now on. May innocent children find solace in our loving maternal and paternal presence. May our words be listened to mindfully, without urgency to speak. May the silence that once caused pain bring us eternal peace. May you know that through you I feel as one. May you know this feeling is more valuable than all material possessions. May you know our parents did their best for us, but we are unique. May we find our way out of the woods through our loving light. And may all expectations be replaced with a pure sense of freedom, for we are loved, loved, loved. And through forgiveness, we are never alone and never lost. Thank you for watching. Have a beautiful night. Be well.